Well, hello folks, and welcome to this video that I'm going to do today. It's been the first in a little while, so again, apologies for the delay. I've added a video to the Vedic Apprentice and above membership, but this is the first one in a while for doing the Secrets, Fame, and Infamy playlist. So forgive that delay, because as you know, I've been extremely busy, and then I had a very difficult Mercury retrograde, with inflamed eye and all this kind of stuff, and and just being just so busy. I put a lot into consultations, as you can imagine, and the average that people go for is a consultation that's either an hour or an hour and a half. So, and then there's all the preparation, and then all of the stuff that happens afterwards. It's just busy. It's just busy. But I love doing them, and there's so much, especially recently. My God, the content has just been just fantastic, just incredible kind of stuff. Anyway, so at last, I have done the full analysis, and this is going to be the video for JFK, John F. Kennedy. And my goodness, do you know what? After I've completed the analysis on his chart, literally I just had to sit down and just have a cup of tea and a bowl of cornflakes and just reflect on what I've discovered, because it's really profound stuff. And there's things here that I can see where in his chart where it was just like, oh my goodness, it was just all piling up. It was just all piling up. Everything was piling up, and we will probably never know the full truth of what happened to JFK, particularly in terms of the culprits, for his assassination. But there are some very clear indicators here in this chart, and I may actually just have to keep this video to private membership, because this is still a controversial topic. Here is JFK's chart, and I'm going to do the scan of this chart, and I've made notes on the back as well. So you'll get both pages, and that will be uploaded. This, as many of you know, is the D1. This is where the planets were sidereally at the time that JFK was born. And this here is the D9, the second half of life, the Dharma, also known as the chart of marriage. But not everyone gets married, so really this is sort of like, in many ways, how the life unfolds. If this is the tree, then this is the fruit of the tree. And I always read transits from both. That's how I do my consultations. You read them from both charts. And then it becomes remarkable. What you will see here, just to explain what you're looking at, where you can see that the planets are printed, so to speak, where they're printed, that's where the planets were at the time JFK was born. Where you see things have been added in red, these are where the planets were transiting on the day of his assassination. Now, that day, that infamous day in history, when I just checked it up, was the 22nd of November, 1963, 12:30 CST, Dallas. CST time, Central Standard Time, Dallas. That's when it happens. So just remember that. Remember that date. Many of you watching this will know that date anyway, and it will be etched in your memories, but especially in the memories of primarily a lot of people's parents. A lot of people's parents. That was just really just earth-shattering. Right. So I'm going to get stuck in on the basics. John F. Kennedy or JFK, affectionately known as, was born on the 29th of May, 1917. When I saw 1917, I was like, oh my goodness, this, that's, I mean, 1918 was the huge kind of Spanish flu and all that kind of stuff, First World War, and just show. I mean, it's just remarkable, yeah. When you think of that, how long, sort of, kind of getting to how long ago this is now, but also how time itself just can go so quickly. But anyway, that's when he was born, and he was born in Brooklyn, Massachusetts, but it's actually spelled Brookline. So Brooklyn or Brookline, maybe they might have said, but I think it's Brooklyn, how it will be pronounced. And it's so here, because I'm still kind of like reacting to just the profundity of what I've discovered here. But anyway, so JFK was a Virgo ascendant. Virgo, yeah, and his ascendant is at 27 degrees 17 minutes of sidereal Virgo. That's the sign that was rising on the eastern horizon at the time that he was born. And he is also a Virgo in his Navamsha as well, in the Navamsha chart, second half of life chart. Now, I don't really need to, and this video isn't really about his presidency so much, his life, etc. Of course, it's talking about that fateful day. And what I want to illustrate is how the lords of houses, planetary lords, and dashers, and the nodes of the moon, which they're fate and destiny, sorry, forgive me, guys, for all this coughing and hacking and what have you. It's the morning here. It's just after, what time is it now? I think this is basically my first time speaking today, and I've literally just had coffee and cornflakes and stuff like that. But I think, what time is it now? I can't actually, because I'm filming on my phone and waiting for my computer to show me. But anyway, when it comes up, here we are. It's 7:16 in the morning of Friday, the 11th of February, 2022. So this is when I'm recording this, and I couldn't sleep. I slept for a bit, and I was just like, you know what, I just need to do this video. Anyway, I digress. Now, what one needs to understand is for Virgo ascendants, and this varies, from chart to chart. But Mars is a very difficult planet, very challenging planet for Virgo ascendants. Why? Because Mars, in a Virgo ascendant chart, becomes the lord of the 3rd house and the 8th house. Yeah, and why is that a challenge? First of all, the 3rd house, in its nature, is a challenging house anyway. Pardon me. It is known as a house of self-efforts. But it also deals with transportation and commutes of all kinds, all kinds of commutes, especially locally or in one's country. It can also deal with international stuff, but primarily it deals with travel, travel by, car or coach or plane or whatever. So I want you to remember that 3rd house, 3rd house deals with all those things. It also deals with siblings and skills and oratory, abilities and talents and entrepreneurship and entertainers of all kinds. It deals with that. But let's not forget the primary thing as well it deals with is travel. Travel, particularly driving. So remember that. And so many interesting things were going on, particularly on that day when he passed. But Mars is the lord of 3rd house of self-efforts and the 8th house, which I refer to as what? The house of sex, death, and rock and roll. So let's just remind ourselves. 8th house, sex, death, and rock and roll. It also deals with the private parts, the genitals, as a body part, but it deals with traumas, transformation, wills, surrender, life insurance. It deals with psychology and addictions. It deals with metaphysics, but it also deals with disgrace, bankruptcy, inheritance, taxes, money from others, corruption. It deals with magnetism. It deals with conspiracy theories. Yeah, that's a big thing, isn't it? Especially in regards to JFK and his assassination. It deals with money from others. It deals with astrology. It deals with the life force, shamans. It deals with alchemy, but it also shows where we have to burn karma, and it also deals with murder. Yeah, remember that. Murder also deals with that. And if we look here, remember what I said, for a Virgo ascendant, Mars is a very challenging planet, yeah, because Mars is a malefic planet anyway. And what does Mars do? Now let's deal with the good side, because everyone talks about the bad side. The good side of Mars is logic, is strategy, skill, discipline in the moment, passion, drive, engineering, problem solving. It's got a lot to do with the medical profession as well, particularly as well when it comes to surgeons, nurses, clinicians. Got a lot to do with the eyesight as well when he's in Aries, because here Mars is in its own sign. So that also showed as well, and it's here with Mercury. Mars and Mercury together. Now they're enemies, yeah? They're enemies. However, the positive aspect of that as well, Mercury is what? The planet of communication. Oratory skills. Mars is here in his own sign, making it powerful, yeah? So that also indicates JFK's incredible oratory skills, his speeches, yeah, and the dynamic and the power of his speeches. And the 8th house also deals with charisma as well. Also deals with charisma. So you see, it's not all bad. And Mars is a planet of passion, and it's a male planet. And let's not forget what everyone here will know, but let's not forget what a superstar JFK was, how excited people were by him, yeah, and the ability of his speeches and his charisma and all that kind of stuff, which kind of basically came across. So I need a lip balm moment here, a little bit dry, and his dynamic speeches, which enraptured people, yeah, enraptured people. But this is also the 8th lord. Mars is the 8th lord and the 3rd lord for a Virgo ascendant. But this is the 8th lord in the 8th house. Now, what does that mean? When the 8th lord is in the 8th house, its 8th house aspect, shall we say, qualities are empowered for good or ill. Remember, the 8th house also deals with metaphysics and stuff like that. But this is Mars, which is already a very difficult planet for Virgo ascendants. Mars is a difficult planet. So here, even though Mars is strong in its own sign of Aries, yeah, but it's the 8th house and he's with his enemy, yeah? Mercury, which is the planet of what? Transportation, yeah? Jupiter is also a planet of transportation as well. So there's that dynamic already. There's that 8th house, that sex, death, and rock and roll, but also scandals, intrigues and death, and those things. This also can deal with a life force, vitality, with the planet of travel. But there's more. If a person is a Virgo ascendant, it means Mercury rules the 1st house, the body, and the 10th house, career. So here you have the planet which is ruling the 3rd house of travel, the 8th house of sex, death, and rock and roll, sudden shocks and surprises, scandals and intrigues, with Mercury, which is ruling the 1st house, the body, because he's a Virgo ascendant, the body, and the 10th house of career, public standing, leadership. Can you see already, just by looking at that 8th house, what the connotations are of all of that together? In one house, Mars and Mercury together are indicating factors that are combined with travel, sudden shocking events, the body, and the career for JFK. Really, that kind of sums it up. I could actually stop there and be like, yeah, that's why, but there's more. What I want you to see is this, and this is where things start getting uncanny. And this also shows the power of the stars, yeah? The power of the stars. And their energy, which is referred to in Vedic astrology as Shakti. Now, I want you to look over here. Here, I'm going to bring this closer. You see, this is JFK's 9th house. Yeah? What's the 9th house? And remember, any houses that have planets in them have greater emphasis. Empty houses still work, but houses with planets in them are emphasized. Yeah. What's the 9th house? It deals with higher learning, gurus and teachers. It deals with beliefs, politics, publishing, travels. See, again, there's that travel factor. The law and lawmakers, religion, fanaticism, spirituality, education, innate inspirations, languages. It's also known as the house of luck, and it deals with the father. Yeah. So here, wow, some geese. What was that all about? Gosh, sorry. Something strange happened. It sounds like a goose crashed into a tree or something. But anyway, because there was a bit of a kerfuffle. Anyway, back to it. So here we see JFK's sun sign is not Gemini, as he would be listed in Western Tropical. It is Taurus. Yeah. So the sun is here in Taurus in the 9th house. This is technically an enemy placement for the sun. Yeah. It affects the sun. And here it is with Venus. Yeah. Now the sun and Venus, even though Venus orbits very close to the sun and Venus are enemies. Yeah, they're enemies. The sun is the king and wants to be on the throne and delegate. Venus is the planet of marriage and compromise. Yeah, business, trade. I give you something, you give me something of either equal value or of a value that is satisfying for the both of us. Venus is trade, but it's the planet of compromise. And the sun tends to struggle in the signs of Venus, but particularly in Libra. But Taurus is still not the greatest place for the sun, because the sun is known as a noble planet. It's a malefic, but it's a mild one, but it's a noble planet. And sometimes when the sun is in Taurus, it can lose a little bit of that nobility, in the sense of that Taurus is extremely sensual sign. Sensual, yeah? And actually, if I look here, let me just double check. Looks like, is the sun in Rohini? Let me just check here. Rohini, yes. Yeah, the sun is in Rohini. Now, Rohini is the most sensual part of Taurus. And Rohini is the moon was going through, because the moon spends a day in each nakshatra. And there's a little story, and basically the moon was spending too long in Rohini, which made Jyeshta, because it was the 27 nakshatras are known as the wives of the moon. Yes, the moon is the feminine principle in terms of matriarchs, mothers, etc. But in the Rig Vedas or in the stories, he sometimes takes on a male persona, and the nakshatras are seen as his wives. And he was spending too long in Rohini, yeah, because it was very sensual. Like Taurus is all about sensuality, food, the senses in general. And the sign opposite, Scorpio, Jyeshta, yeah, was one of the sisters, one of the wives of the moon that got jealous because he was spending too much time there. Anyway, it cursed the moon to wax and wane. But the point is this. Here, here the sun, what can happen is anyone who's a leader, but their sun sign is in sidereal Taurus, but particularly when it's in Rohini, sometimes they can be a little bit too sensual. Yeah, we know that he was we know he's a very sensual man, and he's also got what, 2 planets in the 8th house, which deals with what? Scandals. And it also shows what, that he had what, a bit of an eye for the ladies, because when we think of who did he famously have an affair with, Marilyn Monroe, who of course at that time was easily one of the most charismatic and beautiful women in the world. Yeah, very Rohini. Rohini deals with that whole hourglass figure thing, and it's just a very sensual sign. Deals with food, the scents, candles, aromas, sensuality. It's all heightened. So that can also be in some way a distraction for the king. Yeah, and it wouldn't necessarily be so tricky if he didn't have 2 planets in the 8th house, which deals with scandals and stuff like that. So here, when we look here, there is a relationship here. There's a correlation going on. So, but and also as well, there can also be just the seductions, the sensuality of life, money, excess, and all that kind of stuff. And of course, he was a wealthy guy, and he could enjoy all of his playboy pleasures, shall we say. So there's that. But what I find really remarkable in all of this, and is probably the most important factor here, is the role of Jupiter. Jupiter in his chart. Now, if we look here, there, tucked away, is Jupiter. And it's at 0 degrees 20 minutes of sidereal Taurus. So for Jupiter, Jupiter is also in an enemy sign here. It's in an enemy sign. And again, Jupiter is the priest, the teacher, the priest or priestess. It's a sattvic planet, which means it's dealing with the higher concepts and spirituality and all of this kind of stuff. But this is an enemy sign for Jupiter as well. And so here you've got 2 noble planets, the Sun and Jupiter, both in an enemy sign with their enemy, Venus. Yeah. And Venus, for a Virgo ascendant, is the 2nd house lord and the 9th house lord. Yeah. And Venus is here in the 9th. Yeah. So that is a great combination for wealth. That's actually a huge wealth yoga. But what it means, what I want to introduce is the concept of marker planets. Marker. What does that mean? Now, what are the marker houses? The marker houses are the 2nd house and the 7th house. Yeah? The 7th house and the 2nd house. And, and so basically, I mean, look, if you've got planets in your 2nd house or your 7th house, it doesn't mean you're going to die. Yeah? I don't want people to get a bit like, start looking at their charts and going, oh my God. We all have to die at some point. But what it is when there are certain yogas formed or certain combinations formed where you have the 7th house lord and the 2nd house lord having a relationship with each other, then it becomes a bit more profound, because here Jupiter, for a Virgo ascendant, rules the 4th house of homeland, real estate, etc., vehicles. This also deals with vehicles, by the way. So remember that 3rd house deals with traveling and commuting. 4th house is vehicles. Don't forget that, vehicles. And so rules the 4th house of vehicles and homeland, and also the 7th house, which deals with the public, anyone that's not us, our relationship, our standing, our reputation. But the 7th house is also a marker house. Yeah. So here you've got the sun, which represents the vitality, the life force, yeah, the divine spark, our ability to influence others. But it deals very much with the life force, is with Jupiter, the 7th house lord, making it a marker planet, and Venus, the 2nd house lord, making that a marker planet as well. So do you see? It's kind of like, Yeah. And then you've got Mars, which is a difficult planet for Virgo ascendant, with Mercury, which is the ascendant ruler. Remember, Mercury is the ascendant ruler, both together in the 8th house, which deals again with what shocks, surprises, death. It's also the vitality as well. I don't want to be too down on the 8th house. It has very positive qualities, but when you start putting that together, do you see where I'm going here? Where this is showing powerful indications. So Jupiter, yeah, remember Jupiter is also the 7th lord. And what we also need to talk about as well is Saturn. Now Saturn here, now remember, Saturn is the planet of government. Must remember that. Saturn is the servant, but Saturn is also the planet of government. So the condition of Saturn will also indicate, particularly for JFK, because he was the president, how his relationship with government may be. And if we look here is Saturn, yeah, in the 11th house. But look who it's with. Neptune. Now, what's the 11th house? The 11th house is rubbing shoulders, friends and associations, yeah, contacts. It is also deals with the house of great gains, the eldest sibling, wish fulfillment, etc., and stuff like that. But nonetheless, Saturn is there, and it's in the sign of Cancer. Yeah, Saturn in the sign of Cancer is very tricky for Saturn. Yeah, because what it does is it's the sun. The Saturn and the Moon are not friends. They really are quite harsh enemies to each other. And when Saturn is in the sign of Cancer, it really can affect the emotions, can make a person actually very emotional, very sensitive, but also unable to let go of certain things. It can become a little bit of an Achilles heel because the emotions can cloud the judgment, because Saturn is a cold, dry planet, and he likes to be in air signs and earth signs, cool and rational. Yeah, it likes to be cool and rational. When he's in the sign of Cancer, that can interfere with that. But it's not just that. It's the fact that it's with Neptune. Now, Neptune deals with what? The film industry. Yeah, that's just something that's just come to me as well. It deals with the film industry. It deals with photography. It deals with spirituality. It dissolves the boundary between the three-dimensional world and the realms beyond. So here, Neptune is having this dissolving effect on Saturn. But also as well, what's Neptune? Neptune is mystery. Neptune also deals with scandals, but also deals with cover-ups, gaslighting, illusions and delusions. So there's this element of cover-up, gaslighting, illusions around what? The planet of government in JFK's chart. And it's in the house of rubbing shoulders and associations. Yeah. So again, this is talking about people that he potentially knew in his circle. Yeah. Maybe a little bit shifty. Yeah. As John Major would say. Of the UK government. He did this extraordinary speech, slight digression, and it was just an absolute arse teardown of the UK government, because as you know, Boris is embroiled in scandals, Partygate, and he just stepped up and was defending democracy and just giving a lash. But that would be a similar thing. Yes, so remember, Saturn represents government, and he's with Neptune, planet of deception, yeah, in the shadow, planet of deceptions, cover-ups, illusions, scandals, hiding things, fog. So there's that. And so we've got those associations there. So you've got the Mercury with Mars. You've got Jupiter and Sun with Venus, yeah, their enemy planet altogether in Taurus. Jupiter is the marker planet, lord of the 7th house. Venus is also the marker planet, lord of the 2nd house. And they're both together in the 9th house, which deals with politics, yeah, and leadership and, and that kind of stuff. Also, JFK is also a Virgo in his Navamsha chart, his second half of life chart. So when we look here, what do we see? There are more indicators, even more indicators of what was going on. So the first house deals with what? The body. And here we see in his Navamsha, he's got Neptune in the first house, Rahu, which can be a planet that deals with what? Deception and lies. Yeah. Gobble, gobble. And we have got here Chiron. So what's Chiron? Chiron is the wounded healer. It can show a wound to the body in the second half of life. Yeah, the Navamsha kicks in, particularly from 35, 36, but once we hit 40. And if I recall correctly, I think he was 46 when he died. So the energy of the Navamsha was also here as well. And you've got Rahu and the shadow of Rahu. Rahu, like I said, is gobble gobble. He's like Pac-Man. It's got a lot to do with conversation and talking. So it also shows that, you know, there's a lot of charisma there for JFK. But the shadow of it can deal with lies and deception. Yeah. So there's that. And it's with Neptune, which I said deals with scandals, and Chiron, the wounded healer, all in the first house. And whenever you've got Rahu or Ketu in the first house, when Rahu's in the first house, Ketu will be in the seventh, which is what? A marker house. And Ketu is what? Liberation from this world. And this is very fated. The one, whenever anyone's got a person, the nodes of the moon in the first house or the seventh house, their life is fated. And Jackie Kennedy, in her chart, she's got Ketu in the first house and Rahu in the seventh, which means that was fated to be with very kind of dynamic, charismatic, almost over the top men, yeah, partners in her life. She was married to JFK, and then she was married to Onassis, yeah, who was at the time one of the richest men in the world. So her life was fated along this axis as well, and there's an element there that comes in. So do you see how this is all stacking up? And what I want to show you, which is something very profound, which I just noticed. Well, I noticed in my thing, and this is where we bring in the Mahadasha. So the Mahadasha is a time sequence when certain planets are taking predominance of influence in one's life. And the analogy that I've used, which you've heard me use before, is a car. Every planet has its own car. Your soul goes into the back seat of that car when that car drives along, and that Mahadasha, its Mahadasha sequence begins. At the start of every Mahadasha sequence, every planet is driving its own car, and then after a certain point, the car stops, that planet gets out, who owns that car, and then another planet gets in, and they start driving in their own style for their duration, and then it stops, and then the next planet gets in, so on and so forth until the Mahadasha period ends. Yeah. So what happens is this: whatever Mahadasha you're in, that planet that rules, that owns that car, where it is sitting in your chart, that house becomes active. And also the houses that it rules, including the nakshatras. And this is spooky. JFK, as I said before, was assassinated on the 22nd of November, 1963. On Friday, 12:30 p.m. CST, Dallas. Yeah, remember that. 22nd of November. He went into his Jupiter-Saturn dasha, which started on the 16th of October, 1963. Yeah? The 16th. It was basically just a month and loose change before he was assassinated. Remember what I said? I said Jupiter is what? The marker planet, yeah? It rules the seventh house, which can deal with death, yeah? So here, in his Jupiter dasha, his ninth house was being activated. That means any planets within the ninth house are also being activated, which means that Venus, who's also the second house lord and the marker planet, was active as well. She got triggered and activated along with the sun, the vitality. But where's Saturn? Yeah, Saturn, like I said, is in the 11th house, but look, it's with Neptune, where there's some secrecy, you know, around government. Yeah, there's that. Wow. And then what we need to do, we need to look at the Navamsha. And if we look at the Navamsha, so just going back to the Jupiter activation, so the ninth house was activated where Jupiter was sitting, but also the fourth house of homeland and vehicles. Remember, fourth house is also vehicles. And the seventh house was active as well. That's just by Jupiter alone. Also as well, in his seventh house, there's Chiron. And Chiron is what? The wounded healer. This can also show the seventh house is a public house, receiving some kind of wound when in public. Isn't this uncanny? Yeah, but there's more. I carry on. So when we look at the Navamsha, the second half of life, we see here Jupiter sits in the fifth house. Now, the fifth house deals with giving counsel and advice to others. It deals with, you know, luck, love, romance, etc. Speculation, taking chances. But look at the sign. The sign is Capricorn. And Capricorn is ruled by Saturn. But Capricorn deals with government, top-down structures, yeah, hierarchy. It's government. And in here, in his Navamsha, we see here's Jupiter, which of course is one of his marker planets, but also as well, just because a planet is a marker planet doesn't necessarily mean it's going to just inflict death upon you, you know, in a flash. You have to look at the dignity of that planet, and the dignity of a planet is decided by the signs that it's in. It shows it's in, you know, it shows its nature. And in the Navamsha shows the inner nature of a planet. So Jupiter in the sign of Taurus is a little bit sketch anyway, but look where it goes to here. It goes to Capricorn. It's debilitation point. Debilitation, and it's there with Pluto. Pluto represents what? The dark night of the soul, intrigues. Yeah, he's the co-ruler of Scorpio. Wherever Pluto is, he represents the 8th house on his own. So here you've got Jupiter, who is the marker planet for the Virgo ascendant, with Pluto in the Navamsha, with Pluto, which is the dark night of the soul, and Hades. Yeah. So there's that. And then let's look what's going on with Saturn. Here it is. Saturn goes to the 12th house in JFK's chart, Navamsha chart. And the 12th house deals with what? Endings, loss and endings. Endings and beginnings, but it deals with endings. Yeah, it's also a moksha house, which means liberation from this world. Saturn is in there. And it's also with Venus. Venus in a man's chart represents what? The wife. Saturn is with the wife. And by transit, you see where it's in red, by transit, you can see Saturn on that day was right with Venus in his natal Navamsha position. But by transit, Saturn on that day of his assassination was with Venus. So, which is the wife. Yeah, he was shot with his wife. But it also, and this is a really scandalous thing for me to say, I'm not necessarily saying that she knew or that she was part of the conspiracy, but Venus is also known as the planet of prophecy. She may have had dreams about it. Yeah, she may have had dreams. I would go as far to say she may have had dreams or some kind of instinct that there were enemies. Yeah, the 12th house is also hidden enemies. And look at the sign. Here, Saturn in Leo is quite a difficult place. Also as well, Saturn in Leo can also deal with imposter syndrome. Where a person doesn't feel kind of legitimate in their leadership role. So there could be that going on. And of course, the 12th house is also bed pleasures. Let's not forget, 12th house is also bed pleasures. And it deals with hospitals as well. And unfortunately, I think he died in that Dallas hospital, didn't he? But it deals with that. It's the hidden kind of stuff. It can also show affairs. So here, he's got Venus in his 12th house. Yeah, Venus is women. So this can also show what? His secret affairs. And I'm not saying that Jackie Kennedy knew, but I think she would have known about his affairs because, she seemed like a very intuitive, well, she's very intelligent, but it also seemed like an intuitive woman as well. And, she would have known. I'm sure she would have known. She would have felt it. So there's that. But when we look by transit, look who's with Saturn. We've got Saturn with Saturn. You've got the Sun, which represents what? Leadership and vitality and stuff like that. And you've got Uranus, sudden shocks and surprises. Here, Saturn in both charts is the ruler of the 5th house and the 6th house in both charts, yeah, because he's a Virgo in both charts. What's the 6th house? Deals with health and overcoming obstacles, deals with divorce, deals with pets, lawsuits, debts, food and diets, accidents, thieves, enemies, challenging competition, police and military. It can also deal with therapies of all kinds. It deals with service, repetitive tasks, practical skills, the digestion and stuff like that. But it's enemies, yeah? And here you've got the Saturn in a kind of, in not a great dignity in the second half of life chart. But Leo, the sign of Leo, deals with what? Leadership, government. What this says to me quite clearly is that he had hidden enemies within the government that were not happy with his leadership. Someone felt he was illegitimate, maybe because of some private views that he had, but also as well, think of all the scandals, the hidden stuff. We will never fully know what was there, but there was someone in the government that did not see JFK as a legitimate leader. Yeah, isn't that powerful? And then you've got Uranus, sudden shocks and surprises. But there's even more. When we look here, the nodes of the moon which set fate and destiny for everyone on planet Earth, yeah, anything that's got a birthday. When we look here, on the day that he passed, he was having what is referred to as a nodal inversion. It's when the nodes of the moon come back to their opposite places. So that's when you've got Rahu with Ketu and Ketu with Rahu. The closer the degree, the more powerful it is. Look at this. This is extraordinary. In JFK's main chart, there's Ketu in his 10th house, which deals with public standing, career, etc. and stuff like that. And it's also with Pluto, dark night of the soul. Look where Rahu was on that day. Ketu sits at 18 degrees 32 minutes and Rahu on that day was at 18 degrees 34 minutes. That is a perfection. There's only literally 2 minutes space between. That means a nodal inversion became exact at that time, in that time frame, in that window of 12:30 p.m. CST Dallas time. That is extraordinary. When I saw that, I was like, oh my goodness. So there's that. But then when we look as well, that means it was happening exactly at the same time in his Navamsha as well. And look, remember, he's got Rahu in the 1st house. There's Ketu there. in the first house, in the Navamsha. In the Navamsha chart, Rahu is at 16 degrees 49 minutes, almost 17 degrees, and Ketu was at 17 degrees 12 minutes, within a degree. Even in the Navamsha, Ketu is what? Liberation from this world. Ketu is a what? A body without a head. Rahu is a head without a body, but literally in JFK's first house in the Navamsha, Virgo rising, there it is. With what? Neptune, Chiron, the wounded healer, Rahu, which can deal with deceptions and lies in the lower vibrations, and then there with Ketu, transiting Ketu exactly at that time. In the second house, because we need to remember too that Venus is the second house ruler for a Virgo ascendant, and she's sitting in the 12th house with Saturn, yeah? So she's bringing the energies of the second house and the 9th house, which she rules, into the 12th house of loss. So the energies of transiting Pluto were there at that time, along with Ceres, which can deal with abduction and the loss of things. You know, it's Demeter and Persephone, essentially, energy, and Uranus, sudden shocks and surprises. So do you see, it's layering up. This energy here from the second house is also being pulled in. The 9th house here as well has got transiting Ceres on the sun, which is what? The vitality. Ceres's or Demeter's daughter was Persephone, who was what? Abducted and taken into the underworld. And transiting Ceres was with his son at that time in the D9. But there's more. If we look here, we've got Ketu in the 7th house of the Navamsha, and which again is a marker house, and it's got Mars, transiting Mars, which of course is a difficult planet for Virgo ascendant, lord of the 8th house, with Chiron, the wounded healer, with Venus, the lord of the 2nd house, marker, yeah, transiting that same house, with Rahu exactly on top in the 7th house in the public. So we can see it was factor upon factor upon factor upon factor. This was just something that was part of the divine order. Well, it wasn't divine, but you know what I mean. Here, 8th house, Neptune was transiting the 8th house of JFK's Navamsha on the day that he died. Neptune is what? Like I said, scandals, cover-ups, gaslighting. When we go back to the main chart, we see here on that day, where we look at the main chart, where the planets were transiting in his main chart. Look, we've got Venus, the marker lord, Mars, 8th house lord, Mercury, dealing with the 1st house and the body and the career, with the sun, which deals with what? Vitality and leadership, all in the 3rd house, which deals with what? Commutes. Traveling. It's just really extraordinary. And to round it off, Jupiter, which is the 4th house lord, which also deals with vehicles, and the 7th house lord, which deals with the public, and can show the end of one's life. Look, it was transiting the 7th house on that day, on the 22nd of November 1963. The marker lord, the 7th house lord, was actually in the 7th house with natal Chiron, the wounded healer, receiving a wound in public. Isn't that extraordinary? And just to kind of round it off, let's go back here. When he was born, Jupiter, the marker lord, was conjunct a very powerful star, one of the most difficult stars in the whole of the constellations, and it's star Algol. And Algol goes from 1 degree and 10 minutes of Taurus. That's where it sits sidereally. Now, the other name for Algol is Medusa, and it's in the constellation of Perseus. What happened to Medusa? This star is associated with decapitation. And sometimes people can literally end up, like decapitated. It's grim. I know this is grim and gruesome stuff, but this is what this star means. But it also gives charisma, shining charisma. It can give wealth as well, and beauty and attractiveness and all this kind of stuff. But it can sometimes come with a price. And here's Jupiter, the marker planet, Lord of the 4th house, which deals with vehicles, and the 7th house, which can be death-inflicting but deals with public, was conjunct this star at 0 degrees 20 minutes, and the star is at 1 degree. So it was on that star that's within 1 degree. That's what I call a perfection. And then on top of that, it's with Venus, who's also the 2nd house lord, death-inflicting, with the sun, the vitality, leadership. So we can see in many ways this was kind of baked in from birth. So this was a fate that was hard for JFK to avoid, yeah, because there were so many factors that were piling in into that. And so I just thought I would share that with you, and without doubt, and this is why I can say this, because this is a private video, it was an inside job. Yeah, there was Lee Harvey Oswald and whatever, but there is that whiff of military there as well. The 6th house deals with military and police and stuff like that. Was he ex-army? You know what? I can't remember. I should have checked out a little bit more on Lee Harvey Oswald. But anyway, I just thought I would share that and show all those factors there and how they all piled up together to create this very historic and momentous event, which were very much connected with the nodes of the moon. The nodes of the moon were exactly inverted on that day. Jupiter was in the 7th house. Pluto and Uranus were a factor, but so was Saturn. It was Saturn's was the driving the car, yeah. And then that all activated. Saturn was in his 12th house in his Navamsha with Venus, which is also the wife. And the 12th house is hidden enemies in government. And in his D1 chart, Saturn sits in the 11th house, which is what? Rubbing shoulders with people. People had a grudge, yeah? People had a grudge, and they didn't like his style of leadership, and voila. Anyway, I will leave it there. I hope you enjoyed, even though it is a bit dark, I hope you enjoyed that. And I hope that gave you some insight and reflection of how the planets work, but also the background of what was going on with JFK. All right, cheers. Thank you. Bye-bye.